Good afternoon, doctors, and good afternoon, Abasud ma'am. I am Prasad, associated with the Genesia division of Shield Healthcare, and it's a pleasure for us to invite you for this webinar, all of you doctors, and thank you, ma'am, Dr. Abasud, for giving this opportunity for us to deliver this content, that PCOD in adolescent women. And I have pleasure in introducing to the participants Dr. Abasud. Dr. Abasu is HOD in Obstetric Gynec IVF Jaipur Golden Hospital, Delhi, and in practice for more than 35 years, and President Delhi Gynec Forum, Northwest Delhi, and especially interested in endocrinology and infertility field. And thank you, ma'am. Over to you. And I also welcome our PMT and Dr. Prachi from our Medical Affairs Department.
Yes.
Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, Dr. Prachi, we can have the launch of the Shield Connect. Sir, stop the share, please. Dr. Prachi, we can have the launch of Shield Connect.
अब ये क्यों आ रहा है?
ये हमने स्क्रीन शेयर की क्या?
हाँ तो नहीं हो रही ना
करना है अब शेयर पे
हेलो
हेलो
Chit-
अच्छा ओके
Chitrakala, can you play the AV please?
मैडम काम करो
ये फिर से चला गया क्या हो रहा है?
Ma'am, we wanted to honor us with the launch of Shield Connect web page. So after that, we can start your screen share, ma'am.
All right. So when you ask me to share the screen, I'll start sharing.
Yeah, thanks. So in the meantime, please help us launch this Shield Connect.
Okay.
That's a web page created by Shield Healthcare, especially to connect all of you, seniors, and also a form for junior doctors to learn from these experiences and case studies presented there. It's on, ma'am.
Hello. Ma'am, can you click on that link? Abhasud, ma'am, can you click on that link to inaugurate?
Should I start sharing the screen?
No, ma'am. Can you help
click
us?
on that?
Yeah, from your screen, you can click on this link, ma'am. Shield
Okay.
Connect.
So that way it will be inaugurated.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mommy, yes, you can start.
Can I start now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much to the organizers and welcome all the audience. So today my journey is adolescent PCOS and its management. So let's see how far we reach.
Ma'am, can you can you run the slide with the full screen, madam?
Isn't it full screen?
No, ma'am. You have to go to slideshow.
Is it full screen?
No, ma'am.
No. So full
No.
screen complete.
Ma'am, just go where 53% is mentioned. Down. Come down on the last. Yeah. 53 के बाजू में there is a icon, no, on the left side. 53 ने 53 के just बाजू में यहाँ 53 लिखा है. No, not this.
Not this.
Ma'am, yeah.
Ma'am, Saurabh, please wait. Ma'am, go to the top right side corner square.
Yes.
Top right side square. You have a hyphen, a square, and a X. Yeah, you have done that. And now right side bottom of the screen, ma'am, you have 3 points there. One hourglass type, 4 cubes, and another picture. Yeah, that one. Click there. Thanks, ma'am. That was perfect.
So इसमें number
Then go on.
Number कैसे आएगा? Okay, so what is the definition? तो वो जो नंबर चाहिए ना, हाँ तो वो चाहिए। तो इसमें स्लाइड, इसमें नंबर definition is it is a transitional stage of physical and psychological development from puberty to adulthood. Generally, the age which is taken is 10 to 19 years, and there is an unexplained persistent hyperandrogenic anovulation in cases of PCOS. So, adolescent PCOS, as said, there is unexplained persistent anovulation. So, how this is important? Because it affects the health-related quality of life. So the risk factors are premature puberty, that is if it occurs quite early before 8 years, obesity, family history, and ethnicity. And these factors are very, very important because they judge the prognosis and sometimes the treatment also, but these are not included in the diagnostic criteria as defined by the international bodies. The prevalence it varies from 2 to 18% depending upon the diagnostic criteria and ethnicity. The incidence is increasing prevalence due to childhood obesity and improvement in the methods of diagnosis, especially the ultrasound. Adolescent PCOS, if we use the strict criteria as defined by NIH and Rotterdam, you can see the difference. 6 to 8% and 15 to 25%. And in Indian, Asian urban community, this number is more and seems to be rising. Let's see the reasons if we can find out. NIH criteria, as you all know, we are not using because it does not include the ultrasound morphology of the ovaries. So NIH and Rotterdam criteria are the two. One is historical and the other one which we are using. This disease is progressive it depends upon the persistent irregular cycles, especially if they persist 6 years after menarche. Persistent anovulatory cycles 3 years after menarche and increased BMI. Pathogenesis is insulin resistance, change in GnRH pulsatility due to various factors. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, yes. Genetic.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Genetics, especially with VNTR, which is variable number of tandem repeats in chromosomes, which is a genetic factor which is easily reproducible and it is inherited. Then low birth weight and early puberty. The low birth weight babies have a gray fat which predisposes the person for central obesity, which is very common in PCOS patients. So presentation and dilemma in diagnosis. There are menstrual irregularities, chronic anovulation, hyperandrogenism as seen by acne, hirsutism, androgenic alopecia. Then hyperandrogenemia may not be resulting in hyperandrogenism, and PCO picture on ultrasound. So what are the symptoms and their frequency in PCOS in adolescents? Menstrual cycle disturbance is present in 70%. Out of that, 50% is oligomenorrhea, 10% have amenorrhea, and sometimes it might be heavy bleeding, 10 to 15% cases. Hyperandrogenism present in 70% of the cases, acne in 70%. Hirsutism, they say 70%, but we have to see what kind of hirsutism has to be taken into consideration. Alopecia is 10% as seen by the gynecologist, but dermatologist feels it is more than that. 50 to 60% of the patients are obese, but even normal periods may be present in 20% of the cases. And these are the symptoms which brings the patient to us, because though the patient is obese in 50 to 60% of the cases, but still it is the other symptoms like menstrual irregularities and abnormal hair growth, etc., which brings the patient to us. So what is the dilemma? Overdiagnosis of PCOS and underdiagnosis of PCOS. These are the overlapping pictures. On one side, there is polycystic ovary morphology, there is menstrual dysfunction, and there is hyperandrogenism. So they can be all combined in the patient, or they can be individually present also. So one has to decide to label the patient with PCOS or as an individual ailment, so that the patient is not physically or psychologically disturbed. Before we go to the fixed criteria as advertised, what are the physiological changes in adolescents? There is hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance, which is exaggerated by the genetic and obesity, hyperpulsatile gonadotrophic secretion, hyperactive ovarian androgen synthesis, hyperactive adrenal androgen synthesis. There is menstrual irregularity due to decreased level of insulin growth factor binding protein and serum hormone binding protein, which results in PCOS. Here, one thing has to be noted that after puberty, insulin and IGF-1 progressively decrease in most females. So these are the physiological things which we should not be in a hurry to label the adolescent patient as PCOS. So after seeing the normal puberty changes which resemble PCOS like menstrual irregularity, hyperandrogenism, and insulin resistance, specific and very strict criteria has to be used in cases of adolescents. So So what are the menstrual cycle abnormalities? Delayed periods are most common. Other presentations are withdrawal bleeding only, absent periods altogether, heavy menstrual bleeding, or menorrhagia, that is delayed and heavy periods which results in anemia. Menstrual problems are present in 80% if the patient is obese and 30% if the patient is lean. 20% PCOS have normal cycles. This has to be kept in mind. And it is well accepted that if menstrual irregularities persist for 2 years after menarche, which is very important not to jump at the diagnosis of PCOS, then the risk for PCOS is extremely high, that is 70% of the cases. This is a very interesting slide which shows that anovulatory cycles are present first year after menarche, that is in 85%, and 6 years after menarche in 25% only. So if we are treating the patient as PCOS after first year, we can use lot of drugs, or we can just reassure the patient and ask them to change their lifestyle and diet style so that there is spontaneous resolution of the correction of the menstrual cycles. Now about hirsutism. It is rarely a teenage temporary phenomena, needs a long time of hyperandrogenism to become a real problem, may have other etiologies apart from PCOS as adrenal hyperfunction due to enzyme deficiencies, but a fair incidence can be due to familial predisposition. There are 9 hormone-dependent sites on the body where the hirsutism should be evaluated. This does not include the forearm and the legs because the hair on these 2 sites are mostly due to familial predisposition. The Faring-Galway scale is generally used. This model quantifies the extent of hair growth, 9 key anatomic sites which are androgen dependent, and the grading is 0 to 4 and for a maximum score of 36, and it becomes significant if the score is more than 36. Alopecia, hyperandrogenic alopecia is rare in adolescents and differential diagnosis is difficult, so this is not included in the diagnosis of PCOS. Now comes the ultrasound, which is the most common, I will say, the diagnosis, because most of the time the patient comes with the picture of ultrasound showing multicystic ovaries. So here also one can see prevalence of polycystic ovaries, maybe due to PCOS or multi-follicular, is 6% in 6 years old, and it increases to 26% by 15 years old. And after that, the follicles and the volume almost remain static. So this is the time, the early adolescent period, when one has to be careful to label the patient as PCOS on the basis of ultrasound appearance. So in ultrasound, the ovarian volume is the most important. Normally, more than 10 millimeter cube is taken, and the volume is calculated by applying the formula of an elongated ellipsoid. Most of the modern machines which have good resolution, they have the inbuilt software. Otherwise, the formula which, if you take the 3 measurements, it's 0.5, that is pi by 6 into length into transverse diameter and the sagittal measurement. And there is a change over time, as told you, as discussed before. The highest is 1.3 to 3.8 years after menarche, and after that, the volume remains static. So, there is a little problem in moving the slide.
Hello, ma'am. Can you click beside the slide? Just take a cursor somewhere else and click it.
You know, slide. क्या?
फंक्शन के साथ फंक्शन आपको फंक्शन अरे ये तो आपने सेव नहीं किया, सेव नहीं किया आपने
क्या?
कहाँ रखना आपको, यहाँ पे रखना
नहीं, मेरे को ये अगली स्लाइड दिखानी है।
एक मिनट, आप यहाँ पे ये होता है ना, ये जो
नहीं, फिर मैं पढ़ नहीं पाऊंगी।
अप डाउन एरो
नहीं, मेरे को यहाँ भी चाहिए ना
आप
स्लाइड।
नीचे आना, डाउन एरो वाला कर वो की
हाँ, वो तो ठीक है, पर यहाँ स्लाइड नंबर नहीं आएगा ना।
स्लाइड नंबर आपने डाला नहीं है,
ये है?
नहीं ये नहीं है
नहीं, मेरे को दिखना चाहिए बस।
सर नंबर हाँ जी
So the अब ठीक है, अब चल रहा है, पर आप इधर ही रहिएगा।
हाँ भाई
So the next is the number of follicles. Presence of 12 or more follicles in each ovary, which are 2 to 9 millimeter in diameter, and the volume should, as discussed, should be more than 10 milliliter. The distribution though is very interesting, which is called the necklace-like appearance. But in the modern classification, the distribution is not so important. But all follicles from inner edge to outer edge has to be measured in different sections and planes. The size recommended is 2 to 9 because in average machine, this is the size which can be picked up. But with better machines, even 2 to 5 millimeters of follicles can be picked up. And these are the athletic follicles which are important for endocrine disturbances. And this morphology may be present in single ovary. That is also significant because the endocrine disturbance can occur even if the features are present in single ovary. Now, something about the stroma, which till now is not taken into consideration. PCO morphology is present in 73% of healthy adolescents also in early puberty, and it is decreased by 50% after 5 years. So this is a developmental phenomenon. So in doubtful cases, one can take help of color Doppler also, which shows increased blood flow in stroma, which suggests hyperandrogenism, but not included again in the classification. And then there is a difficulty of diagnosing and then fitting into the criteria due to trans-abdominal scan in obese patients especially. So a new criteria, which is SA ratio, that is the stromal over total area ratio, is a new marker, which is still not included in the classification. And this closely relates to plasma testosterone and androstenedione. This will also differentiate between multifollicular and PCOM ovary, and thus differentiate between gonadotropin pulsatility, which occurs as a result of eating disorders and stress. So we have 3 classifications: PCOS diagnostic criteria, NIH, Rotterdam, which we all follow. This is also called ASHRAE, ASRM, and AES, which is 2006. NIH is almost obsolete because no ultrasound picture is included in this classification. We follow this, in which 2 out of these 3 is required, that is menstrual irregularity, hyperandrogenism, and on ultrasound, polycystic ovarian morphology. In AES classification, as expected, hyperandrogenism has to be present, and then there might be a menstrual irregularity or USG picture. But whenever we are considering hyperandrogenism in all the 3 classifications, there should be the other causes of hyperandrogenism should be excluded. This is the thing which I was talking about. This was recommended in 2010, the Kamina criteria. That is presence of menstrual irregularity, presence of clinical hyperandrogenism worsening after at least 2 years from menarche, or biochemical hyperandrogenism in the absence of adrenal disease, and PCO ovary morphology with stromal hyperplasia, that is stromal to total area ratio of the ovary should be more than 0.33, that is more than 1/3 of the stroma more than 1/3 of the volume of the ovary should be formed by the stoma. So in adolescent patients, if we are making a diagnosis of PCOS, all the three factors have to be there: polycystic morphology, chronic anovulation, and hyperandrogenism. Diagnosis of PCOS probable, but it is not confirmed if polycystic ovaries are not present. This is in cases of adolescents, because all the three factors have to be taken into consideration. Then diagnosis of PCOS in adolescents is not possible if chronic anovulation is not present. Then again, diagnosis of PCOS is not possible if there is no hyperandrogenism. And then if only one factor is present, either of the three, like hyperandrogenism,
करो एरो किसे आओ यहाँ क्लिक कीजिए। एक मिनट मैं आ रहा हूँ आपके स्लाइड नंबर
20 हो गई, अब 30 हो गई, 31।
अब आपको एरो किसे में आओ
उसी से करती हूँ, पर अटक जाता है। देखो नहीं हो रहा ना। हाँ,
आपने क्लिक कर दीजिए, आपने बस एरो भी यूज कर दिया आप लोग।
So what is how to diagnose? So the clinical criteria is to evaluate. So before evaluating or doing an examination, a thoughtful and careful history has to be taken, and then verify the durability and authenticity of symptoms, identify the presence of risk factors for PCOS and insulin resistance as by low birth weight, big weight gain during first year of life, premature puberty, precocious puberty, irregular cycles, especially oligomenorrhea or secondary amenorrhea. You know, sometimes patients keeps on taking the withdrawal bleeding and they say that the periods were always regular. So one has to be very, very careful when taking history, and then its persistence. Then irregular periods can be present in cases of athletes due to stress, in lean patients also, or eating disorders. So lifestyle factor evaluation is also important. And then I would add, nowadays odd working hours, odd studying hours, odd food hours also add to this problem. And when you are evaluating, then the skin manifestation should be documented, and one can take even the picture of the skin manifestation, which can be compared later on. Terminal hair growth, acne, alopecia, acanthasis nigricans, and skin tags. Acne is a teenage phenomena which follows adrenal androgen production, and it tends to shrink after 2 to 3 years after menarche and disappears by 6 to 7 years. But in PCOS cases, it gets worse. There is no spontaneous resolution, and it may extend up to adult life. Obesity is increased adiposity, particularly abdominal, is associated with hyperandrogenemia and increased metabolic risk. Screening is done by increased adiposity by BMI calculation or measuring the waist circumference. Depression is a very important factor. Screening for depression and anxiety by history, and if identified, referral or treatment should be started. This is very important. If there is any doubt, and even otherwise, whether it was a physiological change or patient is progressing towards PCOS, every 3 to 5 years re-screening should be done, and more frequently if there is central adiposity, substantial weight gain, and or symptoms of diabetes develop. So what are the listing criteria which we use? LH-FSH. Classically, the syndrome was attributed to altered LH-FSH ratio, but the recent data suggests that relative increase in LH-FSH ratio increases only in minority of cases, and it does not alter the prognosis or the therapeutic approach. But then this is important in cases of amenorrhea, where LH-FSH may be induced due to hypothalamic hypopituitary hypogonadism. Estradiol describes the follicular activation, which may not be of value to our patients. TSH is important because it can be an alone factor in causing abnormal menstrual cycles. Prolactin is very, very important because the menstrual irregularity and enucleation may be due to hyperprolactinemia, and separate treatment is required for that. Now the AMH. AMH shows the total number of follicles, and the value will depend upon the number of follicles, which may be hormone dependent or may be simple physiological due to multifollicular ovaries, and the stoma is normal there. So AMH as such has no value or no prognostic value in cases of PCOS. But next are the ovarian androgens. Diagnosis is mainly on clinical features, but if the androgenesis is increasing or progressing, then one has to order these androgens, which are ovarian and adrenal. The ovarian androgen should be assessed in early follicular phase, as they are always high during ovulation and luteal phase, and the range varies widely. Often testosterone and androstenedione are tested, but these are not individually high, but their ratio, that is free androgen index, is more important. So combining testosterone with SHBG and calculating FAI is direct, which is direct active on receptors and is most reliable marker of hyperandrogenesis. For the adrenal androgens, serum 17-hydroxyprogesterone level can differentiate between non-virilizing 21-hydroxylase deficient from PCOS, that is classical and non-classical adrenal hyperplasia, and DHEAS for clinical adrenal hyperfunction. So what are the metabolic aspects of PCOS? The incidence of obesity, metabolic disorders, diabetic type 2 and metabolic syndrome, significant increases in cases of PCOS. Obesity, adipose tissue in android distribution, similar to apple-like distribution, and this is related to insulin resistance and hyperandrogenism, and this accounts for metabolic and cardiovascular disease risk. In adolescents, fat deposit must reach 24% of the body mass to have menarche, and this is linked to functional development of insulin resistance. So one can understand, if one reaches the 24% fat earlier on, the disease is going to be early on, and it is going to be in severe form. But again, this obesity factor or the weight factor is not included in the diagnostic criteria. Hyperinsulin secretion is different in both types of PCOS, that is obese and lean. The diagnosis by determining insulin, fasting glucose, and HOMA calculation, which are not easy. In adolescent, DTT is usually normal, mostly due to increased capacity of pancreas to secrete insulin, except in severe obesity, and where it is positive in 70 to 90% of the cases, and it can be abnormal in 50% cases also, even in cases of lean PCOS. The metabolic syndrome is a clustering of components that reflects overnutrition, sedentary lifestyle resulting in excess adiposity. There is increase in waist circumference, blood pressure, glucose, lipids, and associated with high cardiovascular risk. And it is said obesity rather than PCOS per se is associated with metabolic syndrome in adolescents. So after that, we come to the treatment. Lines of therapy, Endocrine Society guidelines described as late as 2030. Lifestyle changes and dietary and exercise modification is very, very important. I would say here one thing, it's not only the calorie restriction which is going to matter, but how those calories are obtained and from which source. Suppose the same number of calories are obtained from carbohydrates and from proteins, the calories obtained from carbohydrates will result in adiposity, and the calories which are gained from proteins will result in increasing muscle mass. So it's not only the calorie intake, it's also the type of diet which one person is taking. And if that is helpful, which is very, very difficult, especially in severe form and the adolescent age where the girl is busy in other activities also. So other supplementation has to be given, which can be in the form of OCP to control the symptoms of hyperandrogenism, or metformin in patients with impaired glucose tolerance or features of metabolic syndrome. Lifestyle therapy is the first line strategy that should include weight loss, calorie restricted diets with no evidence that one type of diet is superior to others, as the evidence says, but the practical is that the carbohydrates have to be markedly reduced in diet. Beneficial for both reproductive and metabolic dysfunction. Because obesity during adolescence is an important factor that conditions the evaluation of ovarian function. Even if one is able to reduce weight loss by 2 to 5%, there is a decrease in testosterone by 21%, and in 50% of the women, regular ovulation can be resumed. Exercise in overweight and obese improves weight loss and reduces the cardiovascular risk factors and diabetes risk, and also avoid alcohol, smoking, and psychological stress, which is very, very important. Hormonal contraceptives are first-line management. That is, after your initial thing is not working, or there is severity of the disease is much, it will correct the menstrual abnormalities and acne and hirsutism. So some caution has to be taken when one is prescribing COC containing 30 microgram or less of ethinyl estradiol. Mild deterioration of glucose tolerance can occur, worsening of lipid profile can occur, but it should not influence once you have decided to give COC. Patients should be warned about these and periodically screened for these side effects. The common complaints which occur due to COC is hypertension. In few, 10 millimeter rise of blood pressure may be there, which settles down once the drug is off. Weight gain can be there with low dose COC, also with low dose it is less. And acne, in fact, OCP is the treatment, and we prefer pill with anti-androgen with progesterone activity, for example, CPA pill. Venous thromboembolism risk is definitely there, though may not be so alarming as in our population, but in international literature it is given quite a good amount of fear. So they should be regularly screened for, and patients should be warned also about this. And this is an interesting thing that the risk is further increased in CPA or third generation progestogens, including drospirenone. So it is not very safe or we should not be completely relaxed once we prescribe the pill containing CPA or drospirenone. One still has to worry for the side effects which can occur due to that. The role of metformin indications is to treat the IGT or metabolic syndrome, long-term resumption of ovulation, especially those with an inadequate response to lifestyle intervention, and it is commonly used as first-line monotherapy or in combination with OCPs or with anti-androgens. So it can be used alone or in combinations with other drugs. So one can combine metformin with doses which attenuate the adverse metabolic effects of OC, improving body composition as compared with OC alone. So what should be the duration of hormonal contraception or metformin? It is still not determined until the patient is gynecologically mature, that is 5 years post-menarche, or has lost a substantial amount of excess weight gain. This factor is very, very important. In fact, when I treat an adolescent or a young patient with PCO, I tell them not to visit me unless they reduce such an amount of weight, which is so very important in the treatment of PCOS. So this is the not so new, but the comparatively new drug which we all are using very, very liberally, and it has shown effects also, and it is very easily available also, the inositols. The role of myoinositol. Let's start with the metabolism. It increases insulin sensitivity, decreases total and LDL cholesterol, increase HDL cholesterol, and decrease serum triglycerides. Helps in reproduction. Even the mood swings are better off. Cell survival and growth is better. Central nervous system also is affected. And it increases, this is a very important thing, osteogenesis. There is increased calcium in the bone. Strength of bone structure is essential if myoinositol has to act. So this is an added advantage of myoinositol. And then what is the role of D-chiroinositol? This enhances the oxidative use of glucose. So apart from the other positive effects of myoinositol, this D-chiroinositol acts in synergy with myoinositol. So are the gatekeepers of our body signaling system adequate? So when we combine MI and DCI, the control of FSH is better. Critical factors for normal fertility, essential for growth and maturation of the ovarian oocyte by correcting the FSH level. It also regulates the insulin-mediated testosterone production, and it stimulates insulin secretion in pancreatic beta cells. The ratio normally in the ovary is considered to be 100:1, which becomes to 0.2:1 in cases of PCO ovary. So it's not only the salt, that is MI and DCI. Inadequate MI DCI levels lie at the root cause of PCOD. So one has to consider when one is prescribing that, especially when there is genetic factors, infertility or androgenism, irregular menses, weight gain, and then environmental triggers. So how can one proceed from PCOD to absence of PCOD with MI and DCI? It's only when MI and DCI levels are brought back to normal levels that PCOD can be thoroughly managed. So one can understand management is really challenging. One can treat only symptoms. The root cause remains unknown. And then whatever is the presenting symptom, one can treat that. Infertility and hirsutism can't be treated together because oral contraceptives block ovulation, and anti-androgens are highly teratogenic. So one has to choose which is more demanding or more important, and accordingly one has to go. There are two management categories. That is, you want to treat the PCOS, which is our category in adolescents. Infertility is of no consideration in our patients. Oh man, again it is blocked. ये फिर से रुक क्यों गया है?
रुका नहीं होगा,
देखो ना, नहीं चलता।
स्टार्ट कीजिए।
अब वो तो नहीं गया। ये तो मेरा वीडियो है ना।
हाँ,
ये नहीं, ये स्लाइड क्यों नहीं चलती है?
तो क्या आपकी
So what is the protocol for effective treatment of PCOD with MI-DCI? It should be BMI based. So there are four pillars of PCOD management with MI-DCI. That means the ratio has to be correct, otherwise the results are not satisfactory. So dose has to be correct, ratio has to be correct, formulation has to be correct. Like tablets or capsules may not be taken so effectively, then the patient's compliance is also very important. So 4 grams per day, optimal for myo-inositol. The ratio should be 40:1. Taste and acceptability by patients impact the efficacy. Tablet and capsules have lower absorption and can alter efficacy. So now what the data says. Efficacy of metformin, this is in regarding to gestation, so maybe I can omit this slide. These are also one can omit. Then this is a study from European Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, which says the consensus is that clinical data demonstrate efficacy of MI-DCI in treatment of PCOD, and these evidences are strongest for dose of 4 grams per day. Myo-inositol in the treatment teenagers affected by PCOS, in which the MI was, the OCPs were given alone or they were combined with MI. The conclusion was administration of myo-inositol is safe and effective to prevent and correct metabolic disorders in teenagers. Combining myo-inositol with OCPs or anti-androgenic effects are enhanced, and negative impact of OCPs is removed. So one can give it alone also, can give with OCPs also, when the result will be effects will be less. So in conclusion, I will say तो 20 टाइम नंबर वाली स्लाइड देखनी
ये फ्रॉम करंट कर दीजिए, ये फ्रॉम
तो ऐसे रुक क्यों जाता है?
वो क्रॉस हो जाता होगा, या तो लास्ट वाले पे आप चले गए, सारी जब खत्म हो गई तो
नहीं उससे पहले अब देखिए
सारी खत्म हो गई ना।
नहीं अच्छा ओके मेरे को 29 पे जाना है, तो नहीं जा रही ना,
आपको ऊपर जाना है। हाँ 1 मिनट
नहीं 29 पे गया
29 एक मिनट
So in conclusion, I am very, very sorry, though I took maximum precautions not to get into this glitch, but I don't know, this happened. So current recommendations are wait for 2 years after menarche before making the diagnosis, refrain from diagnosis and diet to avoid the occurrence of anxiety and depression, evaluation of metabolic status in presence of obesity and or hyperandrogenism, early treatment of hyperandrogenic and metabolic symptoms also before the diagnosis in order to avoid psychological stress and long-term consequences of hyperinsulinemia, and very carefully consider the ultrasound data. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very
Hello,
much.
ma'am.
So keep calm and fight PCOS. Again, very, very sorry that I have to take help for so many people to give this slideshow. So, okay. Again, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Yes, the data and the slides were very nice and very good, and many comments are there, and doctors have really liked your presentation. There is, can I take a few questions, ma'am?
Yes, yes, you can take.
There is one question from Dr. Uma Bhati. The question is the lifestyle changes same for low lean PCOS as compared to obese PCOS? Or,
Not very clear to me. Lifetime.
lifestyle changes for lean PCOS patients and obese PCOS patients. So are they same? The guidelines are same, or are there any differences?
In treating such patients?
In lifestyle management of lean PCOS and obese PCOS.
Okay, as one can understand, obese and lean, the primary focus is on the weight management. So in such patients, though hyperandrogenism and the picture of PCO ovary may be present, but weight management will not become so obvious in cases of lean PCO. So it is not only the weight, though it is a very important factor, but in cases of lean PCOS, that is not so important.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. And Dr. Uma Devi had asked a question specifically for treatment as far as lean PCOS patients are concerned.
So again, as such, you have to go through the same curriculum of symptoms and ultrasound and hormonal evaluation, and then what is the presenting symptom why the patient has presented to you. Suppose there is no symptom and it's only a polycystic ovary morphology. So, and what is the age of the patient? So one has to really reassure the patient that it's only the ultrasound picture, and otherwise if she doesn't have any symptoms and all the parameters are normal. We have to keep in mind the diabetic status of the patient, if there is any, or there is adrenal overaction. So these things has to be taken in mind. Otherwise, patient has to be in long-term follow-up and may not require any particular treatment.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, I have a question like in especially the adolescent girls, how frequently the monitoring has to be done, or are there any guidelines for monitoring of this patient?
So when the patient is very young, say patient has come to you say at 10 years of age, so you have to give the leverage to the physiological changes. And once you have established that these changes are not due to physiological changes which normally occur during adolescence, then what treatment you are giving, how severe are the symptoms, the follow-up will depend upon that. If it is only a milder form and the patient is listening to you, the basic management of the weight and the diet and the working hours, she can be seen little less frequently. But if the patient is on OCPs and metformin and other anti-androgens, then probably the patient has to be seen more frequently, not only for the effect of the drug, but also for the side effects of the drug which can happen.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. The question is from Dr. Surekha. Treatment of hirsutism in adolescents with and without menstrual disturbances.
So hirsutism is a cosmetic problem, especially with young girls. So here, whatever treatment we give, and once we establish this is hirsutism and nothing to do with the family history or with the other factors, then even if we give treatment like OCP or androgens, the treatment is going to take time, maybe 6 months or so. So the topical treatment is very, very important in such patients, which can be like threading or epilation, whatever. So one has to consult the cosmetologist also side by side.
Yes, the role of cosmetologist or dermatologist is definitely
Yes,
there.
very, very important, especially in adolescents. We may not be labeling them as PCOS, but this is a very important factor for young girls, and this has to be taken care of adequately.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, any more additional point? I mean, you have covered very beautifully regarding ultrasonography, but the role of especially the pelvic ultrasonography in adolescent girls.
Role of, I couldn't get the last part of the question. Role of
Pelvic ultrasonography or abdominal ultrasound.
okay. So I mean, the gold standard is transvaginal only, but I don't think in our culture anybody is going to allow a transvaginal in an adolescent patient. So that is why it is very important that who is the person who is doing the ultrasound, what is the machine's qualification, because that is very important, and especially the patients who are obese. Transabdominal ultrasound may not be diagnosing the exact picture. So these are the shortcomings of a transabdominal ultrasound, but what cannot avoid. In fact, nowadays one considers that even if there is no picture, like when we started with NIH classification, there was no ultrasound picture available, but still they were diagnosing it as PCOS. My emphasis is not to give the name of PCOS, but emphasize on the factors which can be improved upon.
Right, ma'am. So when the ultrasound is not so reliable in case of adolescent, probably hyperandrogenism.
I would say reliable. I would say that the picture will improve on its own also in the first 3 years after menarche. So one can give the drug and take the credit, though see my drug has taken care of your morphology. But as a clinician, we all know what is the hormonal imbalance, which may not be even clear in the lab diagnosis. But how this is the art of treating the patient with suspected or proved hyperandrogenism, which is the base, and the insulin resistance, which is the basis of PCOS.
Especially in adults.
And then there are places where ultrasound may not be available, or if it is available, it is too costly for the patients. Even in a city like Delhi, they may not go to the person who is, like I say, well trained and all. So we have to deal with all sorts of patients, and then lead to a conclusion what treatment or what reassurance or what lifestyle management the patient requires.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. There are no more additional questions I can see in the chat box. So, ma'am.
Hello?
Ma'am, hello?
Yes.
So, I don't see any additional questions.
Good. Can I say something?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
My senior, Dr. Sushma Chawla from CGI is here. She can have a full day talking on the life management. I am really in awe of her. You know, I don't think she can ever see a patient of PCOS in her practice because she is so motivating. Thank you very much, madam.
Sorry, ma'am, kind of issue to unmute. Saurabh, go ahead. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for that excellent talk and for the Q&A session as well. So since there are no more questions, I will consider this webinar as completed and
So
it's
thank
over.
you very
Thank
much,
you.
Sheel, and thank you very much for the my dear audience, because I thought I'll come to the IT department of the hospital and there will be no glitch, but still I have to learn a lot, which is a good advantage of these webinars nowadays. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, and
Thank-
thank you, doctors, for joining. And we will share you the link as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctors.
Thank you.